What are some of your favorite artists or albums that have inspired you? I mean, like tried and true, you always go back to them, whether it's for referencing a mix or whether it's just to inspire and get you back to the love of what you do.
Boy, that's a good question. I was not expecting that. Nobody ever wants to know that kind of stuff. Well, there's two sides to the music thing for me. There's the stuff I listen to for enjoyment, and then there's stuff that I listen to kind of professionally. I think for professional inspiration, I have like a lot of Spotify playlists of different engineers' work. And I will go to stuff from, like, I have a playlist for Bob Clearmountain. I have one for Chris Lord-Alge, Tom Lord-Alge, Mike Shipley, Andy Wallace.
Nice.
I'd have to pull up the app, and I could see there's probably Justin Niebank is another one. Those are all guys who have probably influenced me quite a bit over the years. But for fun,
you don't have one for Manny American?
No, I do.
Yeah, you do, baby.
I got one for Manny American. I've got one for Serban Genna in there. Randy Staub. I mean, it's like I'll go and listen to Elliot Shiner. Elliot Shiner's big influence on me. But like the big engineers who probably influenced me the most is probably Bob Clearmountain, the Lord-Alge brothers.
Oh yeah,
so good.
Andy Wallace. And maybe Elliot Shiner, or I don't know that Elliot Shiner influenced me as much as I probably kind of gravitate towards some of the stuff he does. Like he's more to me kind of like he's like the engineer's engineer.
Yeah.
I don't know any better way to say
technical.
that. So
yeah.
Well, but not necessarily. It's just more. I don't know, more hi-fi. I mean, he did a lot of the Steely Dan stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
And there's a Toto record that he did that somebody turned me on to years ago.
Oh, you shouldn't have brought that
up. And there's a track on that, like people if I've tuned a PA, anybody who has brought me in to evaluate a system or tweak a PA or tune it, they've probably heard that song enough to never ever want to.
Mm-hmm.
We're with you
again. Song?
Yeah, we're with you.
I will remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we
all that. I use
We
Turning Point. It's
That's my first one.
Now I'm gonna have to pull up my my thing. But for like mix references, Bryan Adams' Reckless is one that I go back to all the time, that Clearmountain mixed. I'd have to pull stuff up. I mean, a lot of times when I'm referencing stuff these days, I'm pulling up stuff that is current, that like my clients are listening to.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So
that was my next question, actually.
Yeah, so with like the modern worship stuff, I'm pulling up a lot of Elevation stuff, and sometimes Passion. The Bethel stuff I listen to a lot of times just to kind of compare and see how my stuff is with theirs. So Sam Gibson is he's been mixing a lot of stuff. Sean Moffat, those are two of the guys who I check out their stuff a lot just to kind of see what are people doing these days.
Yeah, it's always important to stay in tune with what's happening. For example, like the church music in general, I would say music in general, but it's really impacted the church. Back in the day, there was like two genres of music for a church. You're either like traditional or you were like
back in my day.
Yeah, back in your day. Yeah, okay. I mean, that even extended to like the late 90s, early 2000s. It was rock and roll, but you didn't really have like a lot of EDM, a lot of hip hop incorporated into worship.
No.
Where nowadays it's like no brainer. Yeah, anything goes, and so Young and Free, whether it's the crate tracks or propaganda, different things of that nature. So there's a lot of hip hop influence in just music generally today. A lot of 808s, things of that nature. And so being able to mix those properly, you have to have a reference, right?
Yeah, to a certain extent. Part of the thing for me is, while I want the stuff I'm doing to compete, I guess you could say, and I don't even know if compete's really the right word, but to just kind of stand up with what's going on. I think, you always want to have work that doesn't sound like it's out of left field. But at the same time, if it all sounds exactly the same, it's not going to make an impact. It's, looking back at music history for the last 20, 30, 40 years, the artists that stand out are not the ones that sound like everybody else. If I think about,
Sure.
just in my lifetime, the whole grunge era hit right into high school, early college.
Yeah.
You had the bands that were kind of at the forefront, and then you had the kind of, I don't know that I would call them copycats, because they weren't well, and I don't know that they were necessarily trying to imitate it. It was just all kind of in that thing that was happening at the time, and the ones who got there first are the ones that we usually know about versus everyone else. Or even just thinking, a little more recently, I guess, although it's starting to get dated, but Adele. When Adele hit, when Rolling in the Deep came out, there wasn't anything else that sounded like that at the time. And to me, it sounded like kind of a throwback sort of tune, but compared to everything else that was happening, that was pretty different. And I think it was the same thing with
modern. It still felt modern, even though it was, it was
yeah,
like a throwback track, right?
But it's the same with like when Passion started getting big. I mean, who else was doing that kind of stuff?
Mumford is a great example too.
Yeah,
Mumford
there's another one.
Another one, yeah.
Sure.
But that's a tough thing, I think, for people in general when they're doing music, because thinking back to when I was a singer-songwriter, it was like, yeah, I want to kind of do what other people are doing right now. You're not always necessarily thinking about breaking ground. So it's hard to kind of find a balance between, hey, I want to be current, but at the same time not trying to copy. How do you advance things and make it sound modern and stuff like that? So I don't get too hung up on, does my stuff sound exactly like what's going on? But at the same time, it's the stuff I'm working on is stuff for clients. These aren't my projects, they're their projects. So, it's like, what is their vision, and trying to figure out, how do I achieve their vision and make them happy? Because they're the ones who have to live with it. When I finish the thing and send it off, I'm going to move on to the next thing. But for somebody else, I mean, that's their baby.
Right.
So